Recent loot box controversies have not had an immediate impact on game sales. No fucking shit. One of the stories I saw pop up today was one from GameIndustry.biz with a statement from NPD, the analysis firm, that said loot box controversy having no impact on game sales. It starts with an almost victorious paragraph that says players may complain about loot boxes, but it appears the vast majority of them aren't letting the mechanic deter them from picking up the latest releases. It's certainly true that we've seen a run of loot box based controversies lately as each game's take on the glorified gambling system seems to get more and more egregious. Destiny 2 and its shaders was obviously a big one. Shadow of War turning orcs into loot drops is another. Forza 7's was just pathetic. And who can forget the fury over Star Wars Battlefront 2, a fury that, to its credit, did result in EA scaling back just how exorbitant, just how much piss-takery was going on with its loot box system. But what is this? What is this shocking conclusion? It turns out that people complaining about something that's a big hot thing in games right now hasn't diminished the hotness of the big hot new thing. The overall tone of the GI.biz article isn't completely rubbing it in people's faces. I don't want to attack the article itself. It's just that parts of it are written a little bit presumptuously, and that presumption has definitely been echoed by commentary I've seen around the internet in regards to the article itself. Some people have reacted to the news with pessimism, others with vindication, but the general consensus, and in fairness the most understandably immediate response, has been, well, they're successful, shrug, that's the end of that. And the thing about that is, it's a little bit short-sighted, and it's the same kind of short-sightedness I've blasted the game industry for, well, for years. It's an industry all about immediate gains, short-term benefits, fucking whatever the long-term might be. It's a we're successful now, screw the future mentality. And that's a mentality that has destroyed companies in the past. Companies often deemed too big to fail. Hell, that we're doing okay right now, so fuck everything else mentality has doomed other things. That was pointed out to me by multiple people on Twitter when I was talking about it this morning. It's doomed nations. It may have doomed the world. So let's look at the actual takeaway from this bit of news, NPD's findings. Destiny 2, of course, had a major controversy at launch, with content that was previously available in-game in the last Destiny locked behind the glorified gambling program in Destiny 2, and the fact Bungie didn't warn people ahead of time, the fact people only found out about it once the game was out, was an even bigger cause for concern. But, shock horror, it turned out to be the US's top-selling game of 2017 to date. Is the takeaway there that loot boxes are successful, therefore they're not a worry, they're not a problem, nobody should have to think about them? I don't think so. But, look at this. FIFA 18 in the top 10, which EA makes $800 million a year from. Now keep telling me game publishers are too poor to make fucking games. When you hear a figure like that, you think, well shit, of course they're not gonna stop it. Why should they stop it? Let the good times roll. An NPD spokesperson said, I would not say that the presence of loot boxes causes games to sell at higher levels than games without loot boxes, but what this week's release does suggest is that the loot box or microtransactions controversy has not yet resulted in clear, noticeable limitations of the sales potential of the games with those mechanics. Paraphrased. And again, well, no shit, Sherlock. It's important to note that failure in business can take a very long time, and the loot box craze has only really taken root, deep root, in 2017. In fact, most of these major controversies we've mentioned are only a few months old at the oldest. And the thing about market saturation and audience exhaustion is that it takes years. It's a tree being felled, not a twig being snapped, and the rot can set in while you're riding the tide of success, while you're high, while you're making the money, Right now, loot boxes, I don't even think in the AAA space, have begun to reach the peak of the bubble. To use an overused phrase, I do expect things to get worse before they get better. But I do want to maintain a little bit of hope and say that there is a chance it could get better. There is a chance the audience could eventually be exhausted by so many open world games, by so many glorified gambling systems, by so many fucking currencies that they can't keep up anymore. When looking long term at loot boxes, it's important to note that no, an immediate spate of controversies will not necessarily have an immediate impact on game sales, especially when talk of loot boxes has only just begun to creep slowly into mainstream discussion. And I do like to think that so-called screaming, melodramatic, clueless YouTubers like myself and many others have helped nudge, if only nudge, discussion toward a more mainstream platform. But like I said, the business is hot right now, so no, immediate controversies will not have immediate effects. Not in business where, as I say, the rot can be setting in for a very long time before the visible effects are there. I've talked about this in passing on a Jimquisition before, and I do intend to do a full episode on the death of WCW, the book itself, and the actual historical event, but I'll paraphrase from that book a quote that I have paraphrased before on said Jimquisition that says, of the wrestling industry, when the business is hot, you can do no wrong. When the business is cold, you can do no right. As it pertains to WCW, and I will go into more detail on a Jimquisition, I don't want to give everything away here, some of the worst decisions WCW made, some of the most audience off-putting gaffes that have been made by WCW were made when WCW was raking in incomprehensible amounts of money. I mean, kicking Vince McMahon's ass, kicking the then WWF's arsehole, directly on the whole of it with a steel-toed boot. They were making unpopular decisions that were pissing off the fans, but they were still making tons of money, still riding high from the huge boost that the NWO gave them, which of course they milked until the audience was sick of it. So they shrugged and thought, well, fuck it. We're successful, let's keep doing it. What they didn't know was that they were breeding long-term audience resentment. And once that resentment finally boiled over into lost ticket sales, reduced television viewership, WWF's rise to dominance, there was nothing they could do to right the ship. Because again, when the business is hot, you can do no wrong. WCW was hot, they could do whatever they want and still make money. But their actions turned their business cold, and by that point, there was nothing they could do to fix it. Now, I'm no industry analyst, but I have been examining, observing, talking with people from the industry for over 10 years. I've been basically analysing the game industry longer than some professionally paid industry analysts. And here's some things I've picked up along the way. The mainstream game industry is very short-sighted. As I said earlier, it loves immediate short-term gains and doesn't really give a fuck about the long-term ramifications of their actions. Take note, for example, how in the early 2010s, so many major publishers jumped on the mobile gaming market because mobile gaming was the future. Nowadays, major publishers do still put out spin-offs. Shadow of War has a wonderful little spin-off game that is just another one of those self-playing games that exist just to make people pay money. You know, pretty much 90% of the fucking App Store now. Oddly enough though, all of this rhetoric about mobile being the future appears to have disappeared. Now that mobile gaming is largely a slimy, congealed mess, where you can barely tell games apart from each other, and the market is so deeply saturated it's very difficult for new games to get a look in, suddenly mobile gaming isn't the future anymore. That rhetoric just dried up. Publishers took what elements made money from the mobile market, your loot boxes, your microtransactions, your glorified gambling, and then went back all in on AAA with their big open worlds and their games as services, and started making money on a brand new future. Take a look at another worldwide phenomenon in the games industry, another one that just looked so big you couldn't imagine a world without it. Rhythm games with little plastic instruments. Chiefly, of course, Guitar Hero and Rock Band, but plenty of other publishers jumped on board as well, to say nothing of the third-party controller manufacturers that jumped on board the craze and brought out all sorts of third-party guitars and drums and keyboards that you could play with these games. Business was hot, so the companies couldn't help themselves with releasing and releasing and releasing tangentially related spin-off games with their own little plastic dongles like DJ Hero. Game releases coming out that were specifically for certain bands only. At one point, it got so bad that Activision had released 10 Guitar Hero games in a single year. This included a portable version, an arcade machine, but overall it was just so much. And at the time, who was worried? Because the shit was making so much money, but the rot had set in long before it became visible. I still remember the news breaking that Activision was putting Guitar Hero on hold, that Guitar Hero was basically done. I remember it hitting people like a brick, this sudden news, because it was sudden, it was like in the evening, and then it was like, oh, shit, Guitar Hero no longer making the money Activision wants it to make, abandoned ship, the music game industry is done. It felt like it had just happened overnight, but of course it didn't happen overnight, that's not how businesses fail. They go out with whimpers, not with bangs. Fast forward to more recent years and you get Guitar Hero Live, which, despite having a really shitty microtransaction-based system, was at its core a pretty damn fine game, and Rock Band 4 coming out, which was pretty good, but we haven't seen hide nor hair of them since, have we? Because neither game performed particularly brilliantly. And that's what I mean when I say, when the business is hot, you can do no wrong. When the business is cold, you can do no right. Because at least Guitar Hero Live had some potential to be something brilliant, to be successful, but like I say, cold business. Music games not on vogue anymore, you sickened the audience with it, you tired them out, so it doesn't matter how good you make it, doesn't matter how many improvements you make, the audience was done with you, sunshine. I'm not here to give you false hope and say loot boxes are definitely gonna crash, but I do think at some point, if this continues on the trajectory it's on, if things continue to ramp up, get more extreme, take more liberties with audience goodwill, either this loot box shit is going to go the way of Guitar Hero, or somebody is going to step in and regulate things. Because like I said before, it only takes one major fuck up that gets enough mainstream attention for people to take this seriously and think, okay, this might not technically be gambling, but it's fucking something and it needs a legal definition. And when that happens, / if that happens, well, I'll keep some fucking popcorn on standby, I'll say that much. So no, controversies about loot boxes do not have direct impact on immediate sales. Decline is called decline for a reason, it doesn't drop off a cliff. And I certainly didn't expect any of my fucking videos, which let's face it aren't the most popular videos in the world, to have any direct immediate impact. And anybody covering loot boxes who expects that is fucking naive. As I keep saying, I do believe that at least for the time being I've lost this fight against microtransactions. But I'm not here to win a pointless non-war against a bunch of shit-eating fuck-munchers. I'm here to make their victory as uncomfortable and annoying for them as possible. Just biding my time, being as patient as possible, and seeing how the long-term effect of loot boxes pans out. And despite me saying that I'm going to be patient, that doesn't mean I'm going to stop complaining and whining and moaning about them, because I like doing that almost as much as I hate loot boxes in AAA games, which says a lot. What doesn't say a lot is the current sales figures of major AAA games, which, again, let's point out, they're the major AAA games, the games with big names that were already guaranteed to be successful. The NPD spokesperson does point out that there is a correlation, perhaps, between games with loot boxes and high sales, but correlation isn't causation. And in this case, I think it's especially pertinent because, yeah, Destiny 2 was gonna sell well. Yeah, Shadow of War was gonna sell well. Yeah, FIFA was of course gonna fucking sell well. They put these fucking little slimy, cruelly money-making schemes in the games that were already guaranteed to be moneymakers, because it's about maximising that profit, not about games needing them. Why else would they be in the games that were already gonna turn a profit? Because once again, making all of the money is better than making most of the money. Long story short, we're dealing with greedy, short-sighted fuckers digging their own graves, and I can't wait until they realise they forgot to bring a stepladder to get out.